If theater is a mirror held up to nature, it can also be a cracked looking glass with multiple contradictions. In the current production of The Colored Museum by the Huntington Theater Company, the topic is the split consciousness of African Americans. There's a whole wax museum's worth of prototypes and stereotypes, fragments of history, and news of the day. Just imagine funhouse mirrors with sharp edges. We'd like to welcome two of the cast members, Nathan Lee Graham and Carpathia Jenkins. Thank you very much for being with us.
Hi,
Pleasure.
thank you for having us.
Also with Carpathia, this is something that was originally written in the 1980s, and I was looking at the clips and it sounds like it came out last week.
I know, George C. Wolfe wrote it, and even though it's been 30 years, I mean, you know, as much as we'd like to say things change and we grow as a nation or whatever, as much as things change, they stay the same. And so a lot of what he wrote 30 years ago is still relevant today. And when you see the piece, it's resonating as if he had written it just yesterday. It really is an extraordinary thing. Yeah.
In turn to Nathan, you're both in a series of almost these vignettes that go one after the other, and repeatedly, you're almost like this voice of irony throughout the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Talk about your role.
Well, I do several things in the piece. So there is a very sort of outlandish person called Miss Raj. There is a wonderful sort of Alistair Cook role that I do called the narrator in Last Mama on the Couch. There is a wonderful kid, not unlike Different Strokes, if you will. I have all of these roles, and they're all sort of archetypes. I would say archetypes more than stereotypes, because you recognize them right away, but then we turn them on its head, right? Because it's all satire. This is a very sort of shocking piece, but hilarious at the same time. So you find yourself laughing and cringing in the same moment. And those are what the characters do for the audience as well.
Carpathia, talk about that part, Last Mama on the Couch. I'm looking at it. Oh, wait a minute, isn't that Raisin in the Sun? They're satirizing it.
Yes, it's sort of we're satirizing Raisin in the Sun, oh God, For Colored Girls, I mean, you name it, right? So
Let alone the musicals.
And the musicals that we send up as well. It's just this sort of amalgam of this pot of this mixed stew of sending up all of these sort of iconic plays and musicals that we've seen, you know, in the Black community, African American community. Last Mama on the Couch is, you know, for us as the actors, it's just that time where we're all on stage together. And it's just fun. And talk about the archetypes, you know, the mama on the couch. Literally a mama on a couch, right?
With the same fabric. You
Yeah.
know, her
As the
dress
couch.
is the same fabric as the couch, as the wallpaper. And then
Yeah.
coincidentally, the wonderful costume designer, Anita Yavich, has turned the choir robes that we come into eventually, they're the outside of the fabric, or the inside of the fabric, the inverse of the fabric. So it all sort of correlates, and it's just really hilarious.
Really hilarious.
Well,
And lots of fun.
One hyper-dramatic departure from the original play is you've got the angry young man who ends up getting shot and flagged for overacting. Now, I'm looking at this myself and saying, it's funny, and yet this is not funny.
Well, that's George C. Wolfe.
That's
Right.
exactly.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
so you know, that's a playwright's sort of take on also the playwrights that have been written and that are revived all the time in the theater diaspora. You know, it's like these are the only plays that you accept from the African American community, and yet they're an opportunity for us to always be overacting in a way, quote unquote. And so you should be arrested for that. You should be shot for it.
Well, we'll show you how, just a brief excerpt here of how it's done in the production.
If only he had been born into a world better than this. A world where there were no well-worn couches and no well-worn mamas and nobody over-emotes. If only he had been born into an all-black musical.
Carpathia, another thing that comes up in this play is about hair. And again, this does not sound dated, but talk about that particular part.
Oh yeah, the hair piece. It's, you know, the age-old discussion that we've all had in our households. Are you going to wear your hair natural, a la now, or are you going to perm it and straighten it, or are you going to do a weave or a wig, or... And it's just, you know, it's this age-old conversation, right? We've been having it for decades and decades. I think Chris Rock did a movie about hair, right? And this piece in Color Museum, hair piece, really just is this extraordinary, the way George Wolfe wrote it. It's these two wigs discussing basically which one of us should this character wear to a lunch, right? Should you be strong and coming from a for real place, or should you have straight tresses that you can toss back and forth? I mean, it's just this age-old conversation, which gets back to what we were talking about earlier, that George wrote it 30 years ago, and still today, women still struggle with, should I wear my hair natural in the boardroom, in the corporate world, or should I wear it straight so that perhaps your perception of me is a little different? So it's just, yeah, it's
So you could be more
all
accessible,
that.
so you could be sort of more Anglo, you
More
know, if you
Anglo,
will.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then what we have done that's new, that brings it current, is me playing this woman in the middle,
Yeah, yeah.
this trans woman in the middle. Billy Porter has done that so well in making that come current, you know.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you have all of those elements happening at the same time. And of course, in the original piece, the woman is bald because she's done so much processing to her hair. She's done so
That
many
it's awful.
things that she's actually bald. And then I happen to be bald and happen to be a man, so it just all sort of is very symbiotic.
Impersonating
Yeah,
a bald soprano here. Let's bring up an
Yes.
excerpt of that.
Funny.
Carpathia, we just heard this satire of like gossip, and yet it's so serious. Explain how you can do that. So you can almost trivialize something and get more out of it by doing that in a way.
You know, it's an interesting thing. I think that, you know, we talked about it a lot in rehearsals of presenting all of this material to an audience, but also making them feel safe to have the tough conversations, right? So I think that when you satirize something, when you musicalize something, when you present something tongue-in-cheek, so to speak, it makes the person accept it in a different way. I think it's all in your delivery and the way you present it, whether or not an audience will sit there and have the conversation with you and be uncomfortable and maybe laugh and think, should I be laughing? Or, you know what I mean? It's all a part of it. And the way we present it is a big part. And also the way we transition from one thing to the other also has a lot to do with how an audience accepts what you're giving.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And goes on that journey with you.
Yeah.
So it's a roller coaster ride that we have to invite you into. First of all, come into this wonderful rabbit hole, this theme park. And then once we got you, then the willingness to go with us happens more easily because we've given you, you know, the sweet and the sour, if you will.
Okay, the production's through April 5th, and Nathan, the location, just for people who haven't been there yet?
The Huntington Theater.
Right.
On Huntington Avenue
Yes.
and Massachusetts.
Yes.
Here in the lovely Beantown of Boston.
Nathan Lee Graham and Carpathia Jenkins from the production of The Colored Museum at Huntington Theater. We'll have more news in just a moment.